Previously, we talked about enlightenment and who were the monarchs that welcomed or embraced the new ideas. The first one was Catherine the Great, but because she was a woman, she was faced with a lot of resistance from the elites. So she couldn't embrace the enlightenment in Russia and she failed. This was a failing uh, case. The succeeding case was Frederick the Great of Prussia. Even though he supported all the ideas of enlightenment, the only idea he did not support was equality between people. Why? Because he did not end serfdom. And as we said, serfdom is an equivalent term to slaves, but they get treated properly and they get paid properly. Now, we also said that enlightenment was happening in Europe, and by time the enlightenment ideas reached the colonists back in the 13 colonies in the new land that was discovered. The colonists were trying to think that we should gain our independence and we should be an independent community from the British rule. And we will base our rejections and our objections on the new ideas of the Enlightenment. What happened is Britain had a recent war between it and France. And after the French and British War, which is the French and Indian War, Britain suffered a lot of losses in terms of money, and the country wanted to collect money again. In order to collect money, they had to impose taxes. If they impose taxes on the British citizens, they will go back to the Enlightenment and they will say that there are no rules, there are no bases. Why do you need the extra money? And they're going to object a lot. So instead, the British monarchy imposed taxes and very high taxes on the colonists, the English people who live outside England in the new land. What happened is the relationship between the colonists and the government became disturbed. A lot of conflicts happened, and the colonists began to understand that they are being unfairly treated because they live outside the country. Now, the colonists started to see themselves less than the British, and they got angry with it. Revolution started. They started opposing the taxes. When Britain began to tax the colonists stopped paying the taxes. They started protesting. They started boycotting, or they stopped buying British goods. The British economy started to fall because the colonists wouldn't buy the British goods. So they removed the taxes for a short period of time. The Enlightenment started to succeed in the colonists. But what happened is the colonists started dividing among themselves. Not all the colonists wanted to oppose the British, and some of them were even loyal to the British and supported the British and went and told off the other colonists for the British government. So, to make things short, there were a series of battles, if you remember from grade 10, between the colonists and the British government. And later on, France and Spain joined. And after a longer period of time, the Native Americans or the American Indians joined. After this whole conflict between all of these parts, the results of the revolution was that in July 1776, the colonists finally announced their independence. Britain decided that they're losing a lot of soldiers, they're losing a lot of money to this war, and eventually these 13 colonies will be independent. So they gave up. The declaration of independence was supported by the ideas of the Enlightenment, and the American Revolution was considered as the first successful revolution to overcome a monarchy or to overcome the rule of the government. The Americans, after they declared their independence, they created the American Republic or the United States of America, one independent country that is separate from Britain, France, and the rest of Europe. It has its own rules, its own government. They created the checks and balances, which means that each branch was prevented to abuse the power. They used this idea from Montesquieu's idea in the Enlightenment, which means that the American government is divided into a lot of branches, and each branch is supervised by a different branch, which means, for example, the economy is supervised by certain people. Another group, for example, which is the military department, supervises the economy in order to make sure that no one is taking any money or imposing any money or regulating any laws that are not within the rules. The Americans also created a federal system, which means that the power is divided between the state and the national government. Just like the power was divided between the monarch and the parliament, the power here is divided between the state and the national government, not in one hand only. Finally, they created the Bill of Rights, which are 10 rules or 10 amendments or 10 topics that are added to the Constitution to protect the citizens, regardless of their status, regardless of their gender, regardless of their religion or race. Now, the American Revolution started spreading all around the world, that it was a combination of the Enlightenment ideas, and it was an objection against the authority, and this started spreading to Latin America, which will later on resulted in future other revolutions around Latin America and the rest of Europe. Now, from these slides, you need to differentiate between two things. What are the causes of the revolution, or what are the reasons behind the revolution? Why did the colonists start the revolution? Three reasons: the taxes, the boycotting, and the Enlightenment ideas. The taxes and the Enlightenment ideas, these were the two reasons why the colonists started the revolution. Boycotting was the reason why the British monarchy started to fight and oppose the revolution. So I can ask you one general question, which is state the general causes of the revolution. Then you will state one, two, and three. I can ask you what were the colonial causes of the revolution, and then you have to mention only one and two, which means why did the colonists start the revolution? I can ask you a third question, which is what are the British reasons to oppose the revolution? And then you will mention only number two, that the British had to stop the revolution because they knew that it's going to affect the British monarchy. How? When they started boycotting. This is one side, which is the causes of revolution. The other side, which is the results of the revolution. The results of the revolution are the Declaration of Independence, the checks and balances, the federal system, and the Bill of Rights. Do you have any questions concerning the results and the causes of the American Revolution?
No.
No.
Do you understand the difference? Now, why do you think revolutions base their ideas on the Enlightenment? Or why do you think people are naturally, they do not trust each other? There are several reasons. The first one and the most important one is that humans are naturally selfish. A ruler starts ruling as a monarch at the beginning. He or she cares about the country, they support the country, and then only discovering that there is no one to supervise this monarch, they start to want more power, more money, and they start to abuse the authority. So humans are naturally selfish. Number two, governments are necessary to keep order. Without the government, the world would be chaotic. But at the same time, if the government has all of the power, they will eventually do exactly the same like a selfish monarch, and they will have complete control, and they will favor the people inside the government, not the citizens. This is why not all of the rights should be in the hands of the government. They shouldn't be in the same hands of the same people. This is why there has to be an exchange of power, law, and order between people. This is why there should be elections in the government, and this is why there should be checks and balances, which means that the departments are supervised by someone else. Finally, because people believe that the purpose of the government is to protect the citizens' rights, the people will always be the natural supervisors of the monarchs and of the government. Do you have any questions concerning this lesson?
No.
No.
No, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Miss Minna.
thank you. No, thank you for listening.
حبيبي.
Please don't forget to write the timeline for the enlightenment. And
لسه انا بعته دلوقتي.
okay, thank you. Do you have any questions concerning this week?
يهودي.
No,
على فكرة
لا
بكره
تمام.
Wait,
thank
12.
you.
Do you have questions concerning this week?
No.
No, thank you, Bismillah.
Okay, thank you for listening.